So for problem number 11, it says that the equation A equals 1/2 times 20 times h gives the area in square inches of a triangle with a base of 20 inches and then as a function of its height. So I'm just going to draw a picture. I like to draw pictures. It doesn't have to necessarily be a triangle just like this, but I recommend that you do the same. Remember that the altitude height of a triangle, it goes from the vertex of the triangle straight down to the base, right? So that's the height of the triangle. And then 20 represents the base. So this 20 here means that the base is equal to 20. So then what we're asked is for each given function, determine the domain of the inverse function, then find the equation of the inverse function, and then interpret the meaning of it. So I have a function of h. So first, I'm going to clean it up a little bit. In other words, I have a equals 1/2 times 20 times h. So a, the area, is a function of h. In other words, in this scenario, I'm going to plug in a value for h and get a. The inverse function, I'm going to plug in the value for a and get h. Okay? So let's solve the inverse and then we'll talk about domain. First of all, I think the domain, because we're going to plug, it's going to be a positive value. So the domain will have to be 0 or greater, right? 0 would imply that you don't have a triangle. So I would say greater than 0. But anyways, let's do this. What's 1/2 times 20? 10. So I just need to remember step 1 is we're going to do the plug-in for y thing. Well, we don't do that in this particular case. But we're just going to solve for h, aren't we? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide by 10 on both sides. And now I have a function of a. In other words, if I want to know the height of this thing, I would take the area, plug that in, divide it by 10, and that should give me the height, correct? So this is the inverse function. So now let's talk about the domain of this. Well, as Mr. Adams said, if you just kind of think this through, a has to be greater than 0. It's not going to be a negative number. You're not going to have a negative area of the triangle. It's not going to be 0 because then it wouldn't be a triangle, right? Area implies that it's something. It could be a very, very tiny triangle. It could be a fraction. It could be a decimal, but it would never be 0, okay? So this is the domain of the inverse. And if you're wondering about that, and I mean, that's it. That's all they really want us to do. In the textbook, they do give like a graph, but we weren't asked to graph it. The graph just kind of shows the relationship between the function and the inverse function. So remember that this is the inverse function, and this is the actual function. Okay? Remember that in the function, this is the input, right? And this is the output. But on the inverse function, this becomes the input and this becomes the output. Any questions on that? Does that make sense? Do we have any questions? Okay.